Hello, my name is Ian Weaver, and I thought I'd try something a little different. I decided I'd try to record one of my digital drawings here, just kind of show off the process and everything I go through here. This is a drawing of a Harpy, so I'm sure you can tell from what I'll title the video. Um, so with most of my drawings, like you see here, you can see that I start with a pretty rough sketch, just kind of blocking in some really basic anatomy to get the pose and the energy I wanted to have. I kind of wanted to base this off of like an old school 40s kind of pinup poster. In fact, I was thinking I might actually look into doing a whole set of 12 for like a kind of Monster Girl pinup calendar. I think would be a fun idea. And I used a Harpy design I had made a couple of years ago for a Inktober challenge where I decided I'd try to do a monster girl every day, and I failed miserably at that. Those are still available on my Instagram and my Twitter. You can find those. So I only ever got through about 13 out of 31, but I'll probably try to keep chipping away at them year after year. But here you can see I got the basic pose down. Like I said, wanted it to look kind of like a vintage pinup, so I put her in a very kind of peppy position with the leg raised, and I wanted it to kind of look like she was about to take flight. And that ended up influencing the environment I ended up putting the image on and how I ended up dressing the character. And so after I got the basic anatomy, you can see I started kind of working on the face, which obviously is one of the most important parts of the drawing, is getting some appeal in the facial design. And um, the nose, in particular, from this angle, was giving me a lot of frustration. Noses are actually fairly difficult to draw, and I'm not real great at them. I had a You'll notice I'll redo the eyes a whole bunch of times here because I actually had a sketch that I made on my as an index cards when I was thumbnailing this image, and I really liked how the eyes in that looked. And I never quite got the drawing here to look like that, but I did keep picking away at it for a while trying to match that until I ended up deciding to just kind of go a different direction with it a little bit. I wanted her eyes to really kind of have this sharp eagle vibe to it with some really harsh angles in the design of the eyes and the sort of black sclero look. I mean, I don't know if you, excuse me, sorry, I don't know if you look at bird eyes very much, but um, when you look at like an eagle or like an owl or like a bird of prey, they have these really bright yellow, bright orange eyes, um, and they take the irises take up most of what you see of the eyes, so that the eyelids around them look black. And I wanted to try to mirror that while keeping the eye shape of like a human woman, obviously. So that's why I kind of went with that black sclera look there. And I also kind of wanted to give her fangs just to make her a little monstrous. So I emphasized her canines a little bit, but I know obviously birds don't have teeth, so it's not really a bird feature, but just wanted to make her stand out as a bit more inhuman. Anything I could do to separate her from just being a woman with vaguely animal features taped on her. I kind of wanted to integrate the ideas a little bit more, but didn't do too much of it with this one. Harpies are uh, pretty centauri, like where they've got the part animal, part human on there. So this part here was where I decided that with her trying to take off flight, I thought it would be kind of cute to put her in an aviator's outfit. So I went with the little leather aviator cap and the goggles over top of it, just to kind of give that some playful energy to it, having her dress up, and I thought it'd be cute, be fun. She's got the bomber jacket and the beater and all that. Oh, I meant to give her a scarf, and I never did. Yeah, I completely forgot to do that. Yeah. Oh well, no big deal. But yeah, I did. I did think about giving her a scarf, and I just completely slipped my mind when I was actually drawing it until right now. Here you can see I'm starting to put some details into her shirt. I wanted it to be loose fitting, kind of look like a wife beater, one of those white loose fitting tank tops, and but I also wanted it to be cut off above the waist so you'd see the midriff there. So I actually ended up just making it look as loose as I could, putting a lot of wrinkles into it, and making it look as flowy as I could, and not real great at that, I'll admit. A lot of it was, trying to keep the form of the body underneath, because for pinup you obviously try to make it a little sexy, so I wanted to make sure that her breasts were still kind of implied through the shape of the shirt there. Um, so I looked around, found as many reference pictures as I could, which is always the best way to go about doing this kind of thing is find a lot of reference. Even if you're doing something really stylized or really cartoony, having something there in front of you that you can look at to see how that looks in real life and how you can stylize that definitely helps. um, yeah, so with the visible midriff, obviously, I wanted to put a lot of detail into the anatomy. Something that flies all the time is obviously going to be fairly toned, but also not real bulky, because you don't want to gain a lot of weight through muscle that would keep you from being able to take off. Not that this Harpy design would especially be able to fly. I'm sure it's much too heavy to fly with the size of its wings, but sort of the idea I was going for, getting a very toned stomach and arms, and because those are the muscles that would be doing all the flapping when you're flying and kind of maintaining that muscle tone there. Um, yeah, and I'm not gonna lie, part of her design was inspired a little bit by the Harpy from Monster Musume. I think her name is Pappy. I haven't actually watched the show, so but I do like the colors and some of the shape language, like the long lanky legs that they gave her, and uh, kind of used bits and pieces of that in my design. You'll see that when I get to the colors, I actually made the wings and the tail feathers blue, and it's because I liked how that other Harpy looked from, like I say, Monster Musume. You'll notice when I'm doing the line art, I don't do it so much when I get to the colors that I'm flipping the canvas back and forth, and that's a technique where oh gosh, drawing the feathers. But anyway, flipping the canvas back and forth can kind of give you a new perspective on the image. Helps you see mistakes with angulation and that kind of stuff that you didn't see initially. Uh, I know here I have the video sped up to about 16 times the original speed where I was drawing it, but the wing feathers take forever. Um, right here when I was doing the line art, it wasn't too bad because you can see I kind of gave up on making them real straight or real uniform there towards the end. But when I started getting into actually refining them, oh, they took so long. Yeah, you can see if you look at the end of the feather, I just moved there on the tip of the wing. You can see that I really just kind of gave up on getting that uniform shape and just kind of went, this is where it's going to be. So here I start my line art process. I've still not moved on to a dark line art. This isn't the final color I'll be using for the line art. But I did start, rendering everything out. The more refined your sketch layer is, the easier it is to ink it to do the line art, because then you have a better guide of where you want to put everything and how you want everything to line up. But you'll see here I actually started with vectors. So if you look in that clip right there, you can see that I was moving points around on the line that made up the iris there. And the benefit of vectors is that there's a couple of things. They have more data in each uh, line that you draw, where the program, which I'm using Clip Studio Paint here, by the way, the program actually saves the data of the line along several points, and you can move those individual points or make the line thicker at individual points or thinner when you make little mistakes. It makes it really easy to correct. But I actually gave up on using the vectors because they don't. It's kind of difficult to get the exact lines you want when you're drawing them, when you're laying them down. Sometimes just because of the way they save, it can feel like putting individual lines rather than drawing. It's a little weird to describe, but I didn't really like how drawing with them felt. So I rasterized this layer, which means I took away all the points and just made it a flat uh, line and just drew it normally from this point onwards. But I did start with the vectors, and I didn't really care for using them, but I'll try to learn more about them in the future, I think. Unfortunately, here you can see it'll skip ahead quite a bit because I recently got a dual monitor setup, and I'm not super familiar with all of it, and the recording program I was using defaulted to the other monitor, and I didn't realize, and so I actually ended up losing about an hour's worth of footage of me inking the body and the legs, and uh, but boy, you sure get to see me draw a million feathers in a row, which I'm sure is exciting. It was certainly exciting to do. Um, yeah, so I tried here to just kind of give a line of where I wanted each individual feather to be. Because the trick with the feathers is you're not just drawing the same shape over and over. You're drawing the same shape over and over, but tilting it slightly as you go up the wing. And in addition to that, the wing feathers actually have these two very distinct curves, one around the elbow and one around the wrist, where they get longer and then get shorter and then get longer and then get shorter. And that's where the wings actually fold. When a bird folds up its wings, they actually overlap around those two arcs. So I want to make sure those are really visible. Those really add to the reading of the wing shape there. But so you wanted to make sure that I got that arc in there while also making each feather look correct, look about the same size as some of the other ones as far as width is concerned, and keep a basically similar shape, but also get longer and then get shorter. And it was just a pain in the butt, especially just because it's such a odd shape and I have to angle it up, and I got to make sure the line thickness looks relatively uniform as you go across the wings. Thankfully for the second wing, I started playing around more with the tools that Clip Studio has. I haven't actually used all that much of Clip Studio. My drawing program of choice was Sketchbook for years, but Clip Studio has a lot more tools and options and things that just make digital art a little easier to work with. For instance, here you can see I actually selected around the line art and then expanded that selection by a few pixels, and now I'm just filling in that space. And what that's doing is just thickening the outlines, and that was honestly I hoped it would make the wings look a little more uniform, a little more cohesive. I don't really know how well that worked out for this step of the process. It just ended up making the wings look really heavy with those heavy lines, and it's honestly a feeling I probably shouldn't have tried to get with them, but I think I ended up making it work out towards the end because I ended up doing something similar towards the end and giving a pretty heavy outline to the whole piece like that, which I feel kind of uniform, made that a little more uniform, so it didn't stand out so much. But yeah, in my initial line art before that happens, both I do that to both the wings, and they both stand out as being really thickly lined, and I'm not sure it's the best look. A little bit into doing this wing, like I say, I started playing around with the tools in Clip Studio a bit more, and I started up using what's called the curve tool, where I just kind of make a line from point A to point B of where you want it to be, and then you get to arc the line along a path there so that you can get a bit of a curve to it. Yeah, you can see here I got tired of drawing the wing and just decided I'd line something else. Those bits where random dots appear is me playing around with the dual monitor where I go and check something on the other screen, pull up a reference image or something like that, and then click back to the screen and I end up clicking on the canvas. But I don't think I left any behind in the final image, and it's a lot better than what I've been drawing on my tablet, and putting my hand on the tablet has ended up putting some images there. So working with my Wacom pad here on my desktop, I think looks a little better. Here's where I start using the curve line tool, and you can see it works a lot faster than the other. However, you'll also notice that all these lines are exactly the same thickness the entire way across, and they're much thinner than the lines next to them. And I didn't think about that before I started playing with the tool. And here you can see I'm trying to kind of make the line length a little more uniform, and here I'm playing with the ability of the tool to taper in and out. So it looks more like I drew it as a natural stroke rather than being tool assisted like it was. Didn't always exactly work out. You can see that it kind of loses itself over under where the layers of feathers meet there. Kind of loses itself, but see how much faster I'm getting these feathers done. And in the final product, you really can't tell. I added a lot of highlights and shadows and colors to the wings that made it so they didn't really stand out. But if you do look at the whole piece, um, you will see there that those. If you're just looking at the line art, you can definitely see which ones I used the curve tool on and which ones I drew free-handed, and they don't quite match up perfectly, but that's okay. It ends up looking okay in the end, I think. Here, I just really like having intricate little details and line art in there, like the stitching on the leather and all that kind of stuff. And I know a lot of that you can't really see from a distance, but it's just fun to me to do those kind of things. So here you can see I'm thickening up the outer line on the feathers of her left wing as well, just to kind of make it a little more uniform, match the other wing a little bit better. But yeah, like I said, it makes the wings look really heavy. I kind of wish I hadn't done it. Do it to the tail feathers too, just to make all the feathers look the same. Um, but like I say, when I added thick outline to the whole piece, it kind of made up for it. Didn't make it stand out so much, but you can see how bold the wings look in comparison to the body. So here's a little bit more of me playing with stuff I didn't really know how to use for Clip Studio. I took the line art layer and filled everything inside of it on a different layer with a solid gray. And then every layer after this, I've done what's called a clipping mask. And basically, that sets a layer above a certain layer so that it won't go outside the parameters of the layer beneath it. I know that sounds a little complicated, but basically how it works is that, for instance, the skin color, it's all in a separate layer beneath the line art, but above this gray. And what I've done is I've set this layer that I'm drawing on to be a clipping mask with the gray. So I can't draw outside the bounds of the gray. And so every time I switch to a new color, I make it a new layer, but I still keep it as a clipping mask on the gray so that I can't go outside the parameters of the gray. And then every time I make a new layer, I just make it below the layer I've already done so that it won't overlap. So even though the jacket is above the shirt in the picture, I actually made the brown that is the jacket behind the shirt because I drew the shirt first, and that way I could just draw the jacket without having to worry about making sure to stay in the lines because the white of the shirt is on top, and I already stayed on the lines when I was drawing the shirt. So yeah, this is just me roughing in the colors, choosing what colors I want to do. Interesting. Like I said, I picked the blue and the yellow. Excuse me, just because I thought it looked nice um, from Poppy, from Poppy or Pappy. I'm not really sure. Probably Poppy. Poppy sounds more like a cute name you'd give a character. So here I'm trying to get some shadows, but I wanted to make sure I got a skin tone that looked pretty good first because I didn't really. Her skin tone is very pale when I started off here, and I'm just trying to add some redness under the cheeks and under the nose and areas where you get a lot of blood vessels. And my second idea here was to click a multiply layer of red over top and see if that would make her look a little better, but it just ended up making her look sunburned and swept, and it didn't look great. Um, there's going to be a little gap between these two clips, yeah. And what I did in that time is I actually made a red layer underneath the skin tone I picked, and then made the skin layer on top a little bit transparent so that it actually kind of showed the red through it. What I'm doing here is something I kind of alluded to a second ago with multiply layers. What a multiply layer is essentially it's a layer that will take whatever color you put on it and it will make a shadow on all layers beneath it. It'll darken those layers in the color you picked. So I picked lavender here. I like a really vibrant pink lavender here, and I uh, decided to use the multiply layer to try to make shadows on there. And you can see I'm trying out different colors to see what looks the most natural. Normally, on an average person, the highlights on their skin are going to be warmer colors like red and yellow and orange, and the shadows are going to be cooler colors like purples and blues. So I was trying to stick around a purple or blue kind of color here, and the way I was doing it here, I was erasing the multiply layer where I wanted the highlights to be, and then I just did another layer with add instead of multiply, which basically does the same thing but in the opposite direction. It makes highlights out of whatever color you put on top of it. And I thought this whole thing looked really muddy and bad, so I actually ended up scrapping all the shadows and highlights I did there, and going for a more cel-shaded look. So you can see here, I don't try to blend it as much. I just try to put down the shadows where I want them to end up. And I do end up using the same kind of multiply technique, but oh, sorry about that. I just end up playing a little more with where exactly I want different values to be and where I want the darkest shadows and the mid-tone shadows and the highlights to be. I end up going with two different colors for the shadows, the mid-tone I started with, and then highlight color. So I start here with a kind of broad shadow that I put anywhere I think there'd be any sort of little bit of shadow, and you can see I lightened it there a little bit because I thought it was getting too dark. Then I go in with a darker shadow and anywhere that would have some, anything that would be casting a shadow on it or would be the farthest from the light source, which I've kind of put in the top left there. I put a little shadow from her nose, in her eye sockets where they're kind of brought back away from the light, her chin, that kind of stuff, to kind of really make it pop. And I think it ended up working well. And skin's actually fairly shiny, so I went in with a highlight, tried to make it pop just a little bit more, make it look a little shinier. And did the same thing here at the lips, where I kind of put a highlight layer on top of them and trying to indicate the SCM collarbones. Whenever I try to draw pretty girls, I usually try to put some emphasis on the collarbones and the muscles there because I think it's just I don't know what the word is, just kind of an attractive area there that's got a lot of visual interest to it. Usually I end up taking it too far, honestly, and it ends up looking kind of gross and muscular, so I kind of tried to hold back on this one, especially because it's hard to position the sternocleidomastoid there. It's just, uh, it's a weird looking muscle, but if you can get it to look right, it does look really nice. Here I'm playing with multiple layers again on the feathers, and as I said before, drawing the feathers is the worst. It was a huge pain. But I took another lavender kind of hot pink shadow, which I think worked really well with the blue, and I just tried to highlight where it would overlap and where the kind of mid vein of the feathers was. I don't draw a lot of birds, believe it or not, but I was just trying to kind of get a look here so that each feather would look like an individual feather, because the light feathers, from what I can tell, tend to be a bit more prominent, more easy to see on the actual bird. And then they've got these more downy feathers up around the base of the wing. But I still wanted to give the implication that those are feathery. So you'll see here I'll actually move from doing the individual feathers to doing that kind of downy fur looking area up around the shoulder. End up moving on to that. But man, this took so long, and I hated how it was coming out. And the whole time I was doing this, I was frustrated because I was thinking about how I'd probably have to give up on doing this part. I'd give up all these shadows and spend some time throwing them in there, and they looked bad. It ended up working out, I think, especially because I ended up doing another layer of shadows on top of this one, and that ends up really making it stand out and pop. And I also end up lightening these shadows because you can see each one of these shadows takes up a big portion of the individual flight feathers. So when I lighten them, it still keeps them that blue instead of them being too dark looking, which I think it was sort of starting to get to. Here's me playing around with a tool I don't really understand how to do. It's paint on film lines, which I'll have to look into a little bit more, but I didn't really understand at the time. One thing you might notice I'm doing is, even though I said my light source is coming from the top left, I still kind of put a little bit of a highlight on the right side of the image, and just this little bit of a rim light, and that's like a cast light, I believe is what most artists call it. It's been years since I've had an art class, but really the idea is that everything reflects light, right? Uh, Everything except for, like, the darkest uh, black you could find is going to reflect light in some capacity. And so whatever is behind you, when you're staring into a light, is going to be reflecting a little bit of that light onto your back. So even though your back is hidden from the initial light, there's actually a little bit of a reflection coming back on it. And so when you want to make things look round or realistic or look a little more accurate, you'll put a bit of a light on the away side as well. And it's also really good to help kind of make really shadowy areas distinct from one another. You'll see that I kind of put it in there at the crease of her knee because it makes her thigh and her calf stand out from each other a little bit. You can see that line more clearly because even though it's in a dark shadow there, with that line outlining it, the light there, even if you wouldn't be able to see the actual line I drew there, you'd be able to see the line where the light is there, if that makes sense. And then I emphasize that a little more by, like I say, doing a darker shadow in some of these areas. Yeah, so also just kind of doing a rim lighting around a lot of things can really just make the colors pop a little bit more, can add some depth to it, make different layers seem a little more distinct. And you'll see here that I'm making those uh, veins or those creases in the feathers stand out a little bit more, and really only adding the secondary, even darker shadow to areas that would really be have a shadow cast on them or need some more emphasis. And that way, like I said, it still keeps that bright blue look where it looks still very vibrant, very blue, while also having some depth to it and some feeling of form in 3D shape there. I think it came out pretty well in the end, even though I was unhappy with drawing the feathers as I was doing them because, like I said, they were taking so long, and I thought each individual feather looked kind of bad, and I was worried I was putting enough detail into them. But as a whole, when you zoom out and look at the whole thing, I think it looks pretty good actually. They're very striking, and I was pretty happy with them. The other thing I did to make the different layers of feathers stand out a little bit more is I actually went to the tips of each layer and put a little white highlight. Yeah, you can see me fiddling around with it there. In addition to the individual feather highlights I gave to some of the feathers and to the downier area. I really didn't want to go about drawing every single feather in these downy, smaller feathered areas. So I just kind of used the way I put the light to indicate that there were a lot of smaller objects making up this big mass. And I think it came out pretty well. So here you can see I'm trying to get the leather on the jacket. I haven't really done a whole lot of trying to get accurate leather looks, but I think I got that shine to look pretty nice. I went with a kind of a faded, softer shine. It's reflective, but it's not chrome like perfectly reflective. It's more of a dull shine. Yeah, kind of like a dull brass. I don't know how to say it exactly, but I think you know what I'm getting at. You also see I kind of decided to give her some red eyeliner or eyeshadow, which I just it's just a look that I think looks cool. I saw it on Chun Li in Street Fighter 4, and ever since then I've always thought that it was a cool look. So when I was designing the harpies as a species that I'll probably kind of try to work into Nightmare at some point, I just decided it'd be a biological thing that they would have some kind of coloring there that kind of gives the appearance of a lot of birds have some vibrant colors in their faces and stuff. And I wanted to make the hair and the feathers match as well. Next time I do a harpy, I'll probably not do blue. Um, Blue is usually what I lean towards. Once again, like I said, because I think it looks really nice and might complements the pale skin tone pretty well. But I might play around with like actual bird colorings. I mean, I know bluebirds and blue jays are a thing, but some and they're very clearly birds of prey from the way I've drawn them. They've got the really sharp birds of prey eyes and the really big raptor talons. So I think I'll try to play around with some kind of eagle coloring or something like that. That'll make them. I think colors like that would be a good fit for them. So probably try something like that. So now I've got most of the actual rendering of the harpy herself done, and I'm pretty happy with where it's sitting now. Uh, so I start working on a background. And with the aviator outfit, as I was drawing, I was thinking, what would be a good background for this character? And I decided I would do an airfield. So here you can see I'm using the curved lines again to kind of get the perspective of this runway on an airfield here. And most of initially I was going to have little bunkers in the background that would kind of make it stand out as an airfield, but I didn't end up liking how those looked, and I couldn't really find very many reference images that had anything like that. So most of them were just barren, barren runways in the middle of like a forested area a little bit, or like a grassy area, not forested. Trees would make it hard to make planes take on and off. So probably not going to have a lot of forest around, but I don't do a lot of environmental art, so dealing with the backgrounds here was a bit of a challenge. I didn't really know what I was doing. And there you can see I was thinking about drawing some trees or something in the background, but I had no idea how to go about it, so I didn't. Um, and here I'm creating clipping masks again for the street, or not the street, the the runway and the grassy areas beside it, and then I'm going to go play around in colors and such, lights and darks and all that kind of stuff on top of it. So what I really wanted to get out of the runway itself was the texture of the asphalt, and I really didn't know how to go about doing that. You can see most of the time I don't really try to go too much for uh, real in-depth textures. I usually get very crisp kind of lines between my layers of light and shadow, kind of in a like kind of a cell shaded anime comic book kind of look to the lights and shadows. So when I was trying to do this, I didn't really know how to go about making it look like asphalt, aside from just making it black. So really wanted it to have some texture. So I have this textured watercolor brush, which I should probably look into downloading some more texture brushes and that kind of stuff. But it was really the most textured looking thing I had. But it didn't look like grainy. It looked more wet. Like putting water on a page with ink on it and then dabbing it up is kind of the look that it gives. This kind of runny, watery look. You can see here I put kind of a yellow overlay, and here I am just playing with different stamps for the grass. I'm not really sure, what they were, how they looked. Just kind of playing around with what they had available as far as textures were concerned. But you can see there for a little bit I had this yellow filter over everything, and it's a technique I've seen from other artists online that I kind of co-opted. And the idea is basically if you put a filter over it, then all the colors become a bit more uniform and nothing stands out as being out of place for the lighting you're using or anything like that. So putting this kind of very faint yellow filter on it just kind of makes everything feel like it's in the same place, like you're putting a little bit of yellow atmosphere there. And speaking of atmosphere, you can see I tried to put a little bit of fog over the distant horizon line. And really, as you get further away from something, it becomes less detailed because there's more atmosphere between you and that object. And that's really what I wanted to try to exemplify by doing that. But unfortunately, it just ended up looking like I was adding more highlights to the distance right there. Probably in the future, what I might look into doing is instead of putting like a white fog effect over the distance, I might just look into decreasing the saturation, seeing if I can find a way to do that. And here I'm putting a little bit of border on it. And in Sketchbook, like I say, which is my main program that I use to draw, but I'm trying to switch over to Clip Studio. There's a really easy to use symmetry tool, but I found the one here to be a little more difficult to work with. So I wanted to kind of put just, like I said, kind of get that 40s pinup kind of look to it. Put a little slogan on the side of it there. Clear skies ahead, in case you can't read it. And one of my friends pointed out that the S and the K actually make a little heart, which was not intentional, but it certainly is cute. So it's intentional now. Uh, but yeah, I kind of wanted to get that sort of pop art, 40s slogan kind of look to it, like in an advertisement you'd see around this time. But yeah, so there's that dark line I added around the whole thing, like I was talking about when I did the wings. And, always got to sign your art. So here's the final piece. I made it in the resolution of my new monitor with the intention to make it a background, but I might actually play around with the aspect ratio a little bit so that I can get to work on a Monster Girl calendar. Yeah, so let me know if you enjoyed seeing this kind of thing, and I might do something like that in the future for another drawing, or let me know if you're interested in seeing any more of these. It wasn't especially hard to do, but rendering 9 hours of footage into a 30-minute video takes a while. But yeah, just let me know what you think, and thank you for watching. Bye.